This episode of The Extraordinary Keys for Life with Julia Anais is brought to you by Synergy for the Soul, working together to help you shift paradigms, envision a better life, empower your mind to live a better version of life through educating via workshops, retreats and events. For more information, head to our Facebook page, Synergy for the Soul. Next up, Julia Anais speaks with psychotherapist Dollores Palavra, and they investigate intuition.
Well, welcome to the Extraordinary Keys for Life podcast. I'm Julia Anais, author of Extraordinarily Ordinary Eyes Wide Open to Wonder. And today we're joined by psychotherapist Dollores Palavra, who was my first mentor, who helped me see the intuitive ability which I'd forgotten and brought it back to my awareness. Welcome, Dolores. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks again, Julia. It's really exciting to be here. And as you're saying that I had helped you to remember your intuition, I think it was something that was always there and it was just remembering to trust it.
Yes, 100%. I think a lot of us tend to have these instincts but just don't take any notice of them sometimes.
Absolutely. And there's so many reasons why people don't trust that intuition. And I'm really happy to talk about that today with you also.
Great. Well, firstly, could I ask you how you knew you had intuition?
So interestingly, as children, we have this innate knowing, and what actually ends up happening is that the other people in our lives who are denying their own intuitive feelings also then don't really recognize the insights of the children around them. And I think that for me, I was seeing a lot of the people in my life being quite incongruent with the things that they would say in comparison to the things that they would do. So for example, when you would pick out little white lies from the adults around you, or for example, some of the students at school, and they would tell you one thing, but they're really thinking another. So that would usually make me feel quite uncomfortable. And it was one of those things that I couldn't quite place what was going on, because I had this inner knowing that things were not as they seemed, and that would cause a little bit of anxiety and confusion for me. And probably as a child I came across as quite intense because I would sort of call people out. Later, as I did get older, I started to hone in on these feelings, and I started to realize that I had a way of knowing what would happen next, or if I took certain actions, what the outcome might be. And I think that people just put it down to me being mature for my age. And it wasn't sort of until my uncle passed away, I was just shy of my 18th birthday. And he actually, the day after he had passed away, he actually came through in a vivid dream. And we had quite an in-depth conversation about his estate and the circumstances around his death. And I said to him, well, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to you. If there's any chance that I could see you again, please show yourself to me. And it probably would have been about a year and a half later, that witching hour of midnight, he decided to show himself as a full body apparition. That was very scary, actually, because I wasn't expecting it. But in hindsight, it was a very, very beautiful experience. And it helped me to see that life certainly does go on. So as a result of this experience, it really started to open up the channel for me. And I absolutely threw myself into any kind of book that I could find regarding mediumship, psychic ability, intuition. And I discovered that it was something that I had within me all along. But it actually took this tragic event for it to awaken within me. And a lot of us actually do have a very similar story, whereby after experiencing maybe a trauma or an event in our lives, that it starts us thinking about what else is there. And we're often talking about the third eye, or the crown chakra, starting to really open up. So at this point, I was in my early 20s and really just very, very hungry for information and knowledge. And so what I did was just continue to study and practice my intuitive skills. And it led me to understand that this is just something that we all absolutely possessed, and so many of us don't actually trust. And I really think that one of the reasons why we don't trust it is because so many people around us are probably not validating it. Initially, what ends up happening is that we're looking for confirmation of what we're saying to be true. And I think that if you are asking people around you who are not comfortable with their own intuition, you're going to be met up with challenges. They're not going to be receiving it well. And it's actually one of the things that I say to a lot of my students: when you are starting to come out of the psychic closet and you are starting to develop your intuitive abilities and psychic abilities, it's really, really important that you surround yourself with like-minded people, only so that you can have that safe, encouraging atmosphere when you are starting to learn how to hone these abilities, rather than trying to come across as though you're needing to prove your psychic abilities, especially with people who are non-believers, because it can really, really hinder your growth and your experiences.
Interestingly, that you say you were thought of as mature for your age. That is something that I recognise too. I was always seemed very serious as a child, and I've explored that in my book as well, Extraordinarily Ordinary. And you suggest that having people's encouragement, because I also remember as a child being afraid of this knowing that I had. There was no one around me that I could sort of say anything to without them being freaked out by it and thinking, oh, she's telling us things that they don't understand. Obviously, intuition is known as the sixth sense, which is not a usual sense for us to use. Normally we use our eyes and our hearing and our touch and smell and taste, but sixth sense is largely not recognized, and people that do have those gut instincts often are afraid of them. So I guess that too sort of pulls them away from wanting to know too much about it, or encouraging anyone around them that's sort of inquisitive.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Julia. I really would. But it's interesting though, because when you think about it, one of those primal instincts is to keep ourselves safe, isn't it? And so what you'll find is that a lot of people really have a good way of keeping themselves safe, or doing things that would otherwise be deemed as risky or could be potentially life-threatening. And that is a form of intuition at its rawest form. And the thing is that so many people will actually stay in that particular form of intuition without actually going into the higher realms and the higher thought forms, I should say. So basically what I discovered as I continued through with my journey of developing my own intuition is that the intuitive self, and as you refer to it as your sixth sense, is actually your higher self. It's your higher wisdom really coming through. And so what ends up happening is that some people do believe, and certainly within the New Age spiritual community, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So whether you refer to it as your soul, your spirit, or your higher self, what it actually is, it's the higher knowing and the higher wisdom. And so we all have access to this. And so many people sort of don't know how to access it. So I'm really happy to share that with your listeners today, and to help you to better understand how you can automatically get into this state of higher awareness. So for example, with us, what we're doing currently is we are in a state of consciousness whereby we are accessing our beta brain waves. What's happening is that a lot of us are usually in the waking state, we're in that ego state. And how to actually go straight into your higher self, it's really, really quite easy. So Juliet, let's do it together actually, if you like.
Sure.
Take a moment now and take a deep breath in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as you've done that, and as you've noticed that you have taken a breath, I'd like you for a moment to look outside of yourself and notice you taking a deep breath in and breathing out. And as you're doing that, you'll realize that the real you is noticing Julia breathing.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
You've entered into your higher state.
Yes.
So the observer is your higher self. And once you are in that state, you are receptive to the higher consciousness and levels of wisdom that your soul can access. It's that simple.
Yes, I agree for sure. And some of those keys that you've just given us, you gave to me when I first came to you for the development, and I didn't understand it. It was only after a couple of sessions with you, I excitedly rang you one day and said, oh, I've had all these big ideas to help the world. And I had all of this insight come through, and it really blew my mind, actually. But the intuition is also, I've since learned, known as our inner teacher. So that wisdom is all there waiting for us to access it when we stop and pay attention. And another thing that you taught me to tune into it was to notice synchronicity, as you mentioned earlier, which are known as meaningful coincidences, as Carl Jung said. Would you like to tell us a little bit about synchronicity? Because that was something that you started in me. Well, I wasn't aware. I'd already been noticing, for example, as you said, with grief, a huge event when my father passed, that opened my awareness some years before I found my way to you. I'd been noticing butterflies and music and some other little signs around me. And I've recently spoken to other people who sort of say, oh yeah, such and such passed away, and when I see this, I know that they're around me. You encouraged me further by introducing me to the meaningful coincidences of synchronicity. I think it was feathers that I started with, and then I ended up with so many feathers that I could have probably glued together a bird. And then you said to me to look bigger.
Well, Julia, I know that you can't see me, but I'm smiling from ear to ear because I do remember that phone call and I was very, very happy and very, very excited for you, because when you have that excitement and when everything sort of starts to come together for you, look, I remember it well, and I was very, very happy that you were having those wonderful experiences and everything started to make sense. And so with regards to the synchronicities, they are your soul's markers. So your soul, prior to your incarnation, had an idea of what you came into this incarnation for. So when those markers show up, there's a wonderful, overwhelming sense of happiness and joy and exciting, and not unlike what you've just described then. And what it is that when you start to pay attention, for example, from the afterlife with the feathers that you mentioned seeing and the beautiful wildlife like the butterflies that were coming into your life, when you recognize this to be a message from spirit and you acknowledge that they have sent that through to you, what they'll do is they'll start to actually send you more of the same, and it will further embed that this is a visitation from the spirit world. And it is initially getting our head around it, that is how they communicate with us. And certainly it is very reaffirming that obviously the spirit lives on and that they are with us in our waking hours. Interestingly, with regards to synchronicity, if we're looking at sort of how the mind works and why we do see some of these markers in our everyday life, we can refer to what's known as the reticular activating system. So for example, what you've gone and done is you've said to the universe, this is what I want, or this is what I would like to manifest, or how do I go about achieving XYZ? So what happens through the reticular activating system within our minds, it would actually allow us to go ahead and to see more of what it is that we are wanting to bring into our lives. So, for example, someone might be wanting to go and start a new job, and they're saying, I'm really not quite happy with where I am in this role of mine. And I just wonder if I might be able to even change careers. They might be in the corporate world and they say, I really want to go and work with children. And all of a sudden they might be going through social media, for example, and an ad will come up for a particular course that they might be able to go and study that would then enhance their skills for working with children. Or, for example, they might be reading the Saturday morning paper and never previously before having gone through the employment section, and there it is right there, giving them the opportunity to do an internship and work in a kindergarten. What ends up happening is that your thought will be on changing a particular aspect of your life or wanting to know more information about a particular field. And not very long at all, you will actually start to see different synchronicities come up. And what you're required to do then is to act on those synchronicities, because it's a guide. It's more or less signposts and guides that you need to follow. So when you take step one, step two will then reveal itself. And this is what's quite amazing, is that a lot of people sort of say, I really have no idea how I'm going to get to where I want to. But the most important thing is that once those synchronicities start to appear, you take that first step, the next synchronicity will appear, and then you'll take the next.
Exactly. And I've learned that well now, and learned that trusting those signposts is really the biggest key, because I've just been on a 5-day study course, and they mentioned in there that when you have questions, you need to ask them. And when you ask the questions, the answers will always come. So I've learnt myself to say, how best can I help myself in this situation, or how best can I take the next step, or what shall I do? And without ever a doubt, the answer always appears as you've just described. In some way, something is put in front of you, which is interesting. They also say it's like when you buy a new car, and you may never have seen that car on the road before, but you buy a new car and next minute, everywhere you go, you see that same car.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so true. And interestingly, another way that you can receive answers from your higher wisdom is, for example, you can admit, obviously being in the human form, you can say, well, look, I don't know the answer, but if I did know the answer would be, and then give yourself the opportunity to recognize what comes next. And it's really important that you actually take the first answer that you get.
Yes.
The reasoning is many people doubt it.
That's so true.
Absolutely. And another way, because I know, Julia, how much you love to write, and you are truly an amazing author. I was revisiting your beautiful book last night again, and just in awe. I was wondering then if you'd ever tried, for example, getting into the observer state that I mentioned earlier. And what you can actually do is you can write down the question. So, for example, how do I move forward? Or, just asking yourself a question of your higher self. And since you're already in that state, that next answer will come to you through automatic writing.
Yes, definitely. I was actually going to touch on that. So thank you for pointing that out, because from the development with yourself and learning how to tune into that sixth sense and my inner, I call it my inner counsel, but inner tutor, I was led to write my book, Extraordinarily Ordinary. And I was sort of a bit baffled. I didn't really understand why. As a result of you teaching me to notice synchronicities and to notice the steps, I started journaling. And the journaling is what led me into realizing that I had a lot of things that were congruent with what a lot of other people in their lives may be experiencing, and that perhaps my writing was worth publishing to help people recognize those little things for themselves that can change your life completely. I mean, I had no clue 6 years ago when I was with you that I would be here now, but I've realized that my job basically now is to open conversations. And when you open conversations with people, you start to receive so much more in return. I say, when one teaches, two learn. The journal is another step from that, where you have a conversation or a discussion with yourself. And as you said, that higher wisdom then can come through.
Absolutely. And Julia, you are changing so many lives, and you are allowing other people to see that it's okay to connect in with their inner counsel, which I love the terminology you're using, your inner tutor. It's just wonderful. And this is certainly, it's resonating with me too. So I think that coming through on this journey and allowing yourself to take that next step, and as you said, you weren't sure 6 years ago, but now it all makes sense. And that's exactly how this journey unfolds. It's just, you're only required just to take that initial step, one foot in front of the other, and it will all reveal itself eventually. And I do believe that the reason why we don't see everything at the beginning is because we don't need to. I think it's a sense of trust. And what it ends up doing is it ends up really cementing that trust that we have with our higher self. We look back and we go, wow, it never once let me down. I trusted, I took that first step, and the rest of my journey unfolded. And it gives you that wonderful hindsight and introspection to say, I'm so happy that I was able to listen. And it gives you the confidence to continue to open up and to continue to trust that inner knowing, because you are absolutely on the right track. And it's truly amazing as to what unfolds when you are in that receptive state. What you've actually gone and done is you've created a sense of community. By creating your beautiful book, you've actually gone and been able to invite so many others to do the same, to trust in their own instincts, to show that it's okay to share their journey. You've allowed for that connection and for that community to grow, which is just amazing. And I'm so, so happy that you wrote it and that you've published your book. And I can't wait to hear more about the other 4 that you've got on the go.
It's actually 5 now. Another one started the other day, and I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to write 5 at once? We can do anything when we trust ourselves.
Absolutely, you can.
Also, it's absolutely okay to not know, because you can't know what you don't know. But it's absolutely important to find someone that can support you and encourage you, because that is what you gave to me. When I came to you, you greeted me with open, loving arms and wrapped me in a big hug and gave me some steps, some things to implement, some things to see that could then grow into something which takes practice. The intuition is not an intellectual process. It is absolutely about trusting. And you will make mistakes, and sometimes you won't listen to that first instinct, as you said, and it'll bite you in the butt. And then you'll get back up and realize that you can do it again. Intuition is certainly a very important sense or key to embrace for us to do that. Absolute pleasure to speak to you and catch up with you again, and really appreciate your valuable insight.
Likewise, thank you so much, Julia, for having me on with you today. It's always an absolute pleasure to catch up with you, and I'm so excited for your journey and as it unveils. It's wonderful watching everything that you're doing. I'm just so excited to hear about what happens next.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll keep in touch. Sometimes we're more in touch on that synchronistic plane, as you said, than physically.
I think we're always in some form of telepathic communication, which is just so wonderful. I think it's a very, very strong bond, and that's certainly what does happen when we embrace this journey together. And you end up sort of staying in touch without having to use the usual means of telecommunications. We can do it through the mind.
That's true. I actually heard it referred to as inner technology.
I love it.
Thank you very much, Dolores. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening in today. Many thanks to my guest, Dollores Palavra. You can find her at www.dollorespalabra.com. Music provided by my wonderful son, Bradley Button, who you can follow on Instagram at BradleyWButton. I'd love for you to join us for the rest of this series. And if you think someone else you know could benefit, please share this podcast with them. Coming up in episode 3, we'll discuss with Kawina Gordon, life is short and ever-changing. In fact, nothing stays the same forever. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Julia Renace and at Synergy for the Soul, as well as Whooshka, Spotify and iTunes. Website and YouTube are currently in the works, and you can get the book online at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Remember, never underestimate the vibe of life, and you are the pen to your own book. Don't forget to give us a review, and I look forward to joining you again soon in episode 3. Bye now.